Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about the MG ZS EV and Nissan's Leaf 40 Tekna, which I've owned. I had the Leaf Tekna 40 for 20 months, so I've got a reasonable idea of how it works, and I've had the MG ZS EV for 2.5 months now and over 3,800 miles. Okay, so I'm recording this in the middle of Storm Clara at the moment, and it's raining quite heavily, and I'm at the top of Reigate Hill in Surrey, so I'm in quite an exposed position. So if you can hear the rain, that's what it is. So what's different between them? I keep on being asked by many people. So first of all, the obvious one, the MG is an SUV. It has a higher driving position, it feels higher overall, it feels chunkier. However, it is 165mm shorter than the Leaf 40. It is 19mm wider. It is 75mm taller. But if you take the roof rails into consideration, it's an extra 24mm on top of that. So it's 99mm taller than the Tekna. The wheelbase is shorter on the MG by 115mm, and the MG is lighter by about 48 kilograms. So the MG is smaller but bigger. Power-wise, the MG has 105 kilowatts and the Leaf has 110 kilowatts. Torque, the MG has 353 Newton meters and the Leaf has 320 Newton meters. What that actually means in reality is that the MG 0 to 60 is around 8.5 seconds officially, and the Leaf is 7.9 seconds. So I can only put that down to the aerodynamics of the car, because the weight is in the favour of the MG and the torque is in the favour of the MG. Top speed, MG 87 miles an hour. The Leaf is about 90 miles an hour, so again, very similar. The MG has 3 drive modes: normal, sport and economy. I drive in normal all the time because that gives me the best range on the guessometer, the range, the display of number of miles left to drive. Now, one thing this car doesn't have, which the Leaf does have, is a percentage display of the battery. I don't know why. MG, why? It's on the Thai and Indian versions. Why isn't it on the European versions and the English versions? It's crazy. All EVs have it somewhere. So back to driving modes. So you've got the normal, sport and eco. Eco gives you more miles, but it cuts down the HVAC effectiveness. So you have to have it turned right up to get any decent heat out of it, whereas in normal mode it works fine, and it works fine in sport mode. Those modes also give you slightly different steering feels. In sport mode the steering is a bit heavier, in normal it's, call it normal, and in eco it's a bit lighter for, say, city driving and manoeuvring. The Leaf has D mode, the standard mode, and eco mode. But it also has a B mode, which gives it more regenerative braking. There's a little bit of regenerative braking in D, a little bit more in eco, and quite a bit more in B mode. The MG has 3 levels of regenerative braking. Levels 1, which is minimal, but it's not coasting. 2, medium, and 3 is quite aggressive, and it's almost like one-pedal driving. Which brings me back to the Leaf. The Leaf has e-pedal, which is true one-pedal driving, and it is brilliant. I really enjoyed using it. You can just drive all day without touching the brakes, whereas with the MG you still have to use the brakes to come to a stop. It'll get you down to about sort of 5 or 6 miles an hour if you're driving carefully without touching the brakes, but then you need to use the brakes to stop. When you're stopped, you have auto hold, which is an on-off function. So when you stop and the brake pedal is pressed, the auto hold will hold the car until you touch the throttle, and it will then move off. Sometimes it's a bit more of a jerk when you're moving off. Both of them have an electronic parking brake. The MG's one works slightly better in the sense that whenever you turn the car into drive, it turns it off, and then when you hit neutral and then turn the car off, it applies it automatically. The Leaf turns it off when you move off, but doesn't apply it at the end of the day when you turn the car off. Okay, range. The Nissan Leaf has a supposedly 40 kilowatt hour battery, but only 38 kilowatts, maybe 38.5 kilowatts is actually available to use. But saying that, the final 2.5 kilowatts of those are hidden, i.e. once the display changes from 1% and goes down to the 3 flashing dots, you then have another 2.5 kilowatt hours before the car runs out, beyond zero if you like. The MG, we have a gauge. It's got 8 segments to it. Each segment for the first 7 segments is 9%. It goes from 100 down to 91 for the first segment, 91 to 80 for the second segment, 80 to 69 for the third segment, 69 to 58 for the fourth segment, 58 to 47% for the fifth segment. The sixth segment, or third from last, is 47 to 36%, and then the second segment from last is 36 to 25%, and then it goes, the final segment is 25%. That is a lot, and that's when the battery warning light comes on, when it hits that first bar. The HV battery, high voltage battery light, starts flashing at 10% and will warn you about aggressive driving, and I believe it stops flashing and disappears at 5%, and then it but the GOM turns to the 3 dashes at about 10 miles. So it's not, driving the MG is a lot harder right down at the bottom of the range. I think I said 9% earlier on. It's roughly 11% most of the time between the various light segments on the dash. So it's about 11% between the various light segments on the dash on the power meter. The Leaf has 1 to 100%. The MG also has a 12 volt battery indicator, which is actually quite useful, and you can see when it's charging at 14 volts and when it's not charging. Back to the range. The official range of the Leaf is 168 miles, and for the MG is 163 miles. In the Leaf, the most I ever got was 170 miles with 2% indicated left on the GOM. I was on the motorway, so that was at 55 miles an hour set on ProPilot. That was a boring journey, all the way down from Croydon all the way down to Fareham and back, all on one charge. The worst I've got is, again, Croydon up to Warwick services, 114 miles, and the battery warning lights had all gone on and I was way past zero, according to, I had about 8 miles left, I think, based on the Leaf Spy data which I had available to me. So I knew I could make it, but that was during Storm Gareth last year, and that was appalling driving conditions. So that's the worst I've got. But there again, driving, it was really wet, heavy rain, lots of standing water, high winds, and I was going into the headwind. So that's pretty much the worst conditions you can be driving in. The MG, the best I've got so far is 130 miles, going around the M25 and down the M20, and I arrived there at the Ionity charger at Maidstone services with 8%, and it charged at 53.5 kilowatts. The temperature that day was probably high single figures, sort of 8-9 degrees. So that brings me on to the battery. The battery in the MG is water cooled and apparently suffers from cold gate, so when it is cold outside we seem to get quite low charge rates initially, and driving it fast doesn't appear to warm up the battery a great deal. And so the first charge, I've noticed on a few occasions I've only managed to get about 60% in about 45 minutes. Second charge is fine, and I've been getting the full sort of 82% in about 45 minutes, which is what MG say that it will do. Okay, moving on to the Leaf. That suffered from rapid gate on the first day I bought it, coming back from Burnley. On my third charge, it wasn't great. The battery was overheating, and it really throttled the charge rate right back, so I was only getting low 20s. I've seen it a lot less than that as well over time. I did have the BMS update after about 9-10 months. They released an update and that made it better, but it still suffered from rapid gate on multiple rapid journeys. But as a general rule, that was sort of 250 plus miles. And I don't do too many journeys of that sort of length, but even so, it still did affect us. And the reason for that is the Leaf does not have a thermally managed battery. It's passively cooled, which is appalling in this day and age. The MG's battery, I think they could improve it dramatically if they would heat the battery up using the battery heaters, which it has when it is rapid charging. You might start off slowly, but then once the heater heated the car up using the power from the rapid charger, it would rapidly charge the car and it would charge a lot better. And then of course, because it's got active cooling, it can actively cool the battery once you stop charging and bring it back down to a temperature. I have heard the fans running and the coolant system going round. On the first day I brought the car back from Burnley. We spent the weekend up in the area, Calderdale, and then coming back a couple of days after we picked the car up, we did a couple of rapid charges. The first one, it throttled. That was a Norton Keynes, and I thought that was probably the charger and an Ecotricity one. But then I've subsequently realised that it wasn't the charger, it's actually the car. And then the second charger, I stopped at Oxford Services and used the rapid charger there. They've only got one CCS, and that worked fine. And that was when we actually heard the cooling fans cut in. It's only 50 kilowatts, but I was pulling about sort of 48, 49 kilowatts at that particular charger. It's one of Ecotricity's only new rapid chargers, and it works very well. On average, I'm getting about 130 to 140 miles in winter in the MG, and the GOM is surprisingly accurate when you drive it in normal and have the heating on. Which brings me on to the heating. The Leaf has climate control, single zone, and it works. The MG does not have climate control. It just has manual air conditioning with a nice twiddly dial so you can adjust the temperature and the fan level. It's actually surprisingly effective. It gets the car up to temperature very quickly. The car has been defrosted on the 2 or 3 occasions I've needed to in sort of 2 or 3 minutes, and then I've been able to drive off. So it's not been too much of a problem. So the heating probably does have a hit on range, so does the aerodynamics. It has a bigger battery, as I said. It's 44.5 kilowatt hours as opposed to the Leaf's probably 38 kilowatts available to us. So it's about 6.5 kilowatt hours more, but it has very slightly less range, so therefore it is less economical, which must be due to the aerodynamics of a brick. Going back to size, the boot in the MG is 470 litres, in the Leaf is 435 litres, and it is definitely bigger in the MG, and I think it's also bigger with the back seats down as well. So that's a big plus to me, so I can carry my gear around for work and when we go away on holidays. Comfort wise, the seats are very comfortable in the MG. I've got used to them. They don't have any lumbar support, but neither does the Leaf. The Leafs are a bit more supportive. You sit in them a bit more, whereas in the MG you sit on them a bit more. But they're okay. It's not a sports car. Neither of them are, which brings me on to the handling. So first of all, the MG, it does wallow. There's no question about it. It is very definitely a wallowy car. It makes it very comfortable over long distances, but the suspension does have, as I've said previously, a tendency to crash into certain types of potholes and gets caught out on certain types of rough road, and so it's not great, but we'll talk about that in a few weeks' time. The Leaf suspension is crashy overall. It is firm, which makes it more precise when driving, makes it more fun, I suppose, when you're driving it fast. Overall, it drove me crazy because I was just getting more and more uncomfortable in the car. And I say it's only 28,000 miles, so it was still pretty new. Visibility out is very good in the MG. The A-pillars are quite nice and slim compared to the Leafs, which has a massive driver's A-pillar, which drove me mad, having to peer around it like that all the time. And the same with the driver's mirror. I was having to peer under it, around it all the time. Whereas the MG's mirror, driver's rear view mirror, is that little bit higher, and it makes it just that much easier to use. Autonomy. Nissan has ProPilot, which is very good, and they have got the interface down to a T. It is very good. I don't think it's as good as Tesla's autopilot, but we're talking about a car that's an awful lot cheaper. MG has MG Pilot, which is also very good, but has issues with the bongs. It bongs about everything throughout the car. It's really annoying. I understand that MG might be working on an update to debong the car. We'll see. But in the meantime, when you're using MG Pilot, if you change lanes, tell it to change lanes, it will bong at you. Bong bong. But it does hold on to narrower lanes and tighter turns than Nissan's ProPilot. So if MG could fix that bong bong every time you change lanes, because you've told it you want to change lane, not because it's lost sight of the lanes, but it will bong bong at you when that happens as well. But that's okay, because that's warning me that I just need to tighten my grip on the steering wheel more. Whereas the Leak was a bit more subtle. It was just a ding, and I actually preferred that. It was a lot more gentle, a lot more pleasant. So overall, MG Pilot is very good. It's got traffic jam assist, it's got auto, which also the Leaf has. They both have auto emergency braking. The Leaf has pedestrian detection. The MG goes one further and has cyclist protection, I believe. They also have blind spots, both of them, because it was the Tekna model on the Leaf, and it's the exclusive that I have here. Blind spot detection and rear cross traffic alert, which is both great. Sound wise, the Leaf had the Bose system, which was okay. It wasn't bad. The Leaf has the extra speakers over the Excite, and it's okay. It's probably not quite as good as having a subwoofer, but it has its own 3D sound system, which works when you play with it quite well. However, it does turn on quite loud every time you turn the car on, which is really annoying. As in my previous video, I just went into EQ settings, set a custom profile up, and then set everything down to -12. Mirrors. The Leaf has an auto-dimming rear view mirror. The MG has a good old-fashioned manual one with a lever. Neither had auto-dimming exterior mirrors. Both, because of the models I'm reviewing, have power folding mirrors. The Leaf ones, you could push the button in at any speed and they would fold in. The MG will only fold in under about sort of 10-15 miles an hour, and if you go over that speed they will automatically fold out again. You can manually fold them in by when the button is in its central position, just by pushing it down. Sunroof. As you know, I like the sunroof, it's brilliant. The MG exclusive has the wonderful sunroof, the Excite doesn't, and the Nissan Leaf does not have an option whatsoever. EV stuff. Well, basically the MG has none. No charge timers, no climate control timers, and there's very little driving information that the MG can give you. Whereas the Leaf, it's very well equipped. It's been around for 10 years. It's a very mature product. Old design, maybe, which is half the problem with, I think, that particular car. So yeah, so the MG, all it has is speed, range, current trip totals, which is average speed, mileage, miles per kilowatt, and the time you've been driving. Then it has an accumulated total with the same. Both of the displays will go over 1,000 miles from what I can tell. It then has a battery flow meter and also has a voltage, motor speed and ampage, so you can work out what the charging speed is just by switching the car on and looking at that particular screen. And it also has the TPMS, which seems to work even when the car is stationary, whereas the Leaf TPMS didn't seem to work when the car was stationary. It had to be moving. The Leaf has got all the stuff you could possibly want. The MG UK versions, nothing. The MG Exclusive has roof bars. The Excite doesn't get them, and nor does the Leaf. The seats in the MG Exclusive are vegan leather, whatever that means. Probably just means it's vinyl or whatever it is we used to call them in the 70s and 80s. The Leaf has leather seats, or leather seat facings I should say. The MG Exclusive and Excite come with parking sensors to the rear, but only the Exclusive gets a rear view parking camera, whereas the Leaf gets 360-degree cameras, which are actually very good, and when it's not bad weather they're actually very good and you can actually see all around you. Brilliant for parking. Traction control. The Leaf will spin its wheels at any opportunity. The MG the traction control is a lot more aggressive. You'll get a chirp and then it'll cut in and then you'll move off. You can turn it off, but it's in the settings on the instrument cluster between the speedo and the power meter, so you've got to go into there to turn it off. Okay, driving. Overall, the Leaf feels faster, no doubt about it. It definitely feels faster. I don't know why, because it has less torque and it weighs more, but it definitely feels faster. But there again, I haven't really been driving the MG in sport mode. The MG feels a lot less responsive than the Leaf did. The Leaf, when you touch the throttle, it instantly moved off, whereas in normal and eco modes there is a delay between putting your foot down and something happening. In sport mode that's eliminated and it goes quite quickly, but as I say, the weather's not been particularly kind over the last couple of months for me to try much in the way of sport mode. So if you want that instant EV torque available immediately at the traffic light GP, then you need to have it in sport and it will go. I think at higher speeds the Leaf is definitely quicker, not by much, but it's definitely quicker. But there again, the aerodynamics of this MG, it's an SUV, it's more like a brick, and so it will be affected more by the aerodynamics at higher speeds. And I guess because of that, the Leaf feels more sporty to drive. I wouldn't call it a sports car at all, but it feels more sporty in comparison to the MG. So there you have it. That is my brief summary of the MG versus the Leaf. Now personally, I sold the Leaf and bought the MG. I'm very happy with my decision. I like the SUV driving style. I love that sunroof. It just suits me better. It's a little bit bigger. I do use the back seat quite a lot. I use it for when I'm working. I go out and see a client, so then I'll come back in the car and do some work, and it's just easier to sit in the back seat and it's just easier to get in, and there's more room. The boot has enough room. It's got the false floor, which is great, and just overall I just prefer it as a place to spend lots of time in, and because I'm doing sort of about 18 to 20,000 miles a year, I will spend typically between 2 and 4 or 5 hours a day driving. The MG is just a nice place to be. It's light and airy. It doesn't suffer from rapid gate. It's got cold gate, but that could be fixed by MG with a software update if they so wished. Yes, the bongs are annoying. Hopefully MG will sort that out at a later date. There is a second BMS software update for timed charging. I did my first smart charge last night and it worked fine on Agile Octopus using my Omi cable. I just plugged it in at about 9 o'clock and at 1 o'clock it started charging. I didn't need to put very many miles in the car because it had about 100 or so range left, but I wanted to top it up for today because I'm doing about 70-80 miles in total, and so I'll probably arrive home with about 3 bars or so left on the car. So there you have it. I like the MG. I would recommend it. I would also recommend the Leaf. They're both great cars, but personally, my preference, I sold the Leaf and I bought the MG, and I'm very happy with my decision. Okay, there are a couple of other things about the differences between the two cars. Quite a big one. The Leaf has app. Now, I used it a bit, but most of the time it didn't work, so it was barely worth having, but occasionally it was nice and it did work and preheat the car. MG has no app. We do not know if they are going to provide one. Open Vehicle Monitoring Systems, OVMS, are attempting to reverse engineer the MG so that we can get an app at some point in the future, but that's some way off yet. And there doesn't seem to be a way via the OBD2 port to extract data from the car. The Chinese seem to use some slightly different protocol, but the diagnostics are the same, I believe. But MG can plug their laptops in and do their stuff to it using that port. There may be others around the car I don't know about. Headlights. The Leaf Tekna had full LED headlights with headlights main beam assist, which you could switch on and off yourself, and overall it worked pretty well. The headlights, the full LEDs, were brilliant. I really miss those because the MG does not have LEDs. It has standard projector halogens. They're okay, but on dark, wet, unlit roads it's difficult to see. But if it's dry, it's not too much of a problem. I have upgraded to Osram night breakers, which made a bit of a difference. Heating. In mild temperatures, the Nissan Leaf has a heat pump, which is great, which is very efficient. But at cold temperatures, it still uses a PTC heater like the MG. I'm not sure on how efficient that particular heater is. The Leaf's range in winter weather is not very good. Thank you for watching. I'll speak to you later.